Hey everybody, Pastor Todd here, and I would love to take just a moment or two to talk to you about the second phrase that Jesus speaks from the cross on that Friday. That morning we know that Jesus, along with two other men, were marched to a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull, in order to be crucified. The Bible tells us that there Jesus was laid down on a cross, and nails were driven through his hands and through his feet. The criminals were also crucified, one on his left and one on his right. And one of the things I'd like for you to do as we kind of think through, as we work through this together, is to kind of, as best as we can, try to imagine what each of these two men are thinking as they watch Jesus being crucified between them. You see, we know, and we just heard a little bit ago, that the first thing Jesus said was, "Father, forgive them." And why I think that's important for this phrase is because I believe that one thief was watching and he heard those words. And I can't help but think that in that moment, he thought to himself, if Jesus is willing to forgive these men who are doing these horrible things to him in this moment, he might just be willing to forgive me. And so as the minutes tick by, we know that the religious leaders were there and they're standing at the foot of the cross, and they begin to mock Jesus. They begin to cry out things like, "Aren't you the Messiah? Why don't you save yourself?" And I believe in that moment, the thief who's hanging on a cross is watching how Jesus will respond. He's waiting for him to speak and to say something. And before that happens, we know that the other thief begins to chime in. He begins to also mock Jesus and to say horrible things and to tell him to save himself. And, hey, why don't you save us while you're at it? It's in that moment that the thief who has watched Jesus carry his cross, the thief who has watched Jesus be nailed to the cross, the thief who has watched Jesus ask for forgiveness for the people who are bringing him this incredible pain, corrects the other thief. He says to him, "What's the matter with you? We deserve what we're getting, but this man has done nothing wrong. Don't you fear death? Don't you fear God?" At that moment, he looks at Jesus and he says, "Jesus, will you remember me in your kingdom?" And according to Luke, chapter 23, verse 43, Jesus says these words, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." I can't imagine that moment. And although the Bible doesn't tell us specifically, there's a part of me that wants to believe that when the thief asked Jesus to remember him, that Jesus is so overwhelmed with compassion and joy and love that he does his best to even turn his body, his flesh that's been ripped apart against the rough wood, turns to look this criminal in the eyes to say the words, "Today you will be with me in paradise." I think these two thieves give us a pretty amazing picture of how to die, but also how to live. You see, these two men had seemingly so much in common, except for one really big thing: their view of who God was. And so today I would ask you to consider, on this Good Friday, how will you respond to Jesus in the face of doubts, in the face of fears, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of struggle, in the face of hurts. You see, I think too often it's really easy for us to cry out and to say, God, why are you doing this? Can't you take this away? Can't you rescue me from this? What's the matter with you? And instead, let's take the approach of the other criminal who in humility simply says, Jesus, remember me. And today, my hope is, as we meditate on these words, as we think through the graphic scene of that Friday, that we'll hear the promise that Jesus made to a dying criminal. Today, you will be with me in paradise. And maybe we just need to substitute the word today with someday. And someday, you will be with me in paradise. My hope and my prayer is that today you will ask him to remember you. Have a great rest of your Good Friday.